So maybe a first question would be, give us a state of just your tribes. Madison has just been designated in December, Truax Field, as the home of F35A. Doctor, can you start? Give us an overview. Kenosha, Wisconsin is the epicenter this week of the national debate over law and order versus policing policies, with President Trump coming on Tuesday and Vice President, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden scheduled to come on Thursday. Meanwhile, Governor Evers has called a special session of the legislature on 9 bills he wants passed. Senate Republicans are taking their lead from State Senator Van Wanggaard, a retired Racine police officer, on those issues. And couldn't be a better time for a newsmaker with Senator Wanggaard. Senator, thanks very much for joining us, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity, Steve. Thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you very much. Let me ask you a question that was asked by Governor Evers, Democrats, members of the legislature's Black Caucus. Why isn't the Senate meeting, since you have 8 specific bills drafted, why isn't the Senate meeting to vote on those bills right now, sir?
Okay, so the bills that have been drafted, that we've put out so that people can see what they are, we've started circulating them. We have co-authorship memos that have gone out or will be going out today. So legislators from both sides of the aisle that have already signed on to our bills. Lena Taylor is one of those I've been working with over the last months and years on several of these, because you understand the sausage process with getting a piece of legislation accomplished. And, part of the problem is getting all the stakeholders together to make sure you don't create a piece of legislation that is going to have negative unintended consequences for somebody else. Because it doesn't do you much good to fix one issue and then create a bigger issue someplace else. And so a lot of times you just can't snap and get it done. Now, the governor put bills forward June 2nd, I think it was. And honestly, I've been having conversations directly with the governor and his staff. Governor Evers, myself on the phone talking about this issue, one-on-one, having a conversation. And we talked about the bills he had brought forward and why some of them would not working to modify or to change a little bit some of the other ones so they would be acceptable and create the same clarity in how we do our policing, so that it creates a better process for everybody. And the governor's been real excited about the fact that we've been working on this. I mean, I've met with him probably a couple hours, 3 hours on the phone over the last month and a half, 2 months. And we've also been working with all the law enforcement organizations, groups, defense attorneys, anybody that'd be a stakeholder in different parts of this legislation has been part of the conversation. So the first thing we need to do is get the conversation rolling. It's not just about running in to have a session and then a few senators talk about it on the floor. It's about getting trying to accomplish, and they become a positive part of making this happen. Because if you don't have people that have buy-in, it won't work. So we need to get people that this is going to affect, get them involved also, so it's a fair process, and that helps get it over the finish line. And of course, we're working with both houses also, and we've had members of both houses working on different parts of these bills, hundreds of meetings and conversations over the last months, and God, I don't know how many over the last several years, just on the one that deals with our use of force review board. And I think that's going to bring a whole different level of trust to law enforcement and how they do what they do.
Well, what's your timeline then? If you've been working with the governor and you've been working, you say Senator Taylor is a co-sponsor of some of these.
She's on almost all of them, I think, pretty close to all of them.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. What's your hopeful timeline? Because you've heard the criticism, Democrats,
Sure.
The Black Caucus you should be in right now. What's the earliest timeline for some actual committee or full Senate votes on these, sir?
Well, I'm sure that we're going to start having public hearings, and we'll have hearings on different parts of these bills. Um, I know one of the bills that's going to be coming forward. It's not in our in the eight that we're putting out right now, but it's a bill that's been accomplished by um, Representative Ott and Senator Teston. And that bill was a bill that was passed through the Assembly unanimously last session, came over to our Judiciary Committee that I chair, passed that unanimously. And then we got to the COVID issue and everything, so it didn't get onto the floor. Brought back, has been retooled. A couple things have been added to it that deal with personnel issues with police records and release of those records. That was added to deal with that issue. And I think that one will be ready here pretty soon too, because they're going to release that one out again. But right now they're in the middle of a lot of election processes and stuff too. So that kind of gets things a little bit confused. And the COVID creates another issue. So, and I know it will definitely be addressed by the spring session. I hope these will be the first bills off in the spring. I don't see us coming back before. Happen if we can get things moving and the stars will all line up and we can get consensus on these bills the floor, but not for political purposes. And first thing I told the governor when I spoke with the governor, when he says, what can we do to get consensus on these bills? And I said, Governor, and I think I can tell you this. I mean, it was a personal conversation, but my message to him was directly with the senators that we're trying to put these issues behind us. And secondly, to not make this a political thing. Law enforcement and making laws that affect people like that should not be done for political purpose. This should be to make sure that we have public safety. We have a clear process. I don't know how many thousands of times I've said the word process since I've been in the legislature, but if you don't have a good, clear process, Steve, and people don't know where you're going, and people don't stay within that process, that's when you get into trouble, and you get results that are not necessarily the results that should have come from the set of facts that you were dealing with. So, if we get a good process and everything, I think that's where we're at now. I feel so good about this package that we're going to have very little negative discussion about what we're trying to accomplish. Because we do have people on board and that are understanding what we're trying to. This isn't about getting a one-up or a gotcha on the other side of the aisle. This is about fixing things so that people have confidence in the process. You know, there's always going to be issues in the system, you know, and we need to address those issues when they come up. But to have confidence in the process, that everybody knows what that process is, that just eliminates a whole lot of problems.
Well, okay, just to clarify, because you were breaking up a little bit there, Senator, do you not expect then a vote on your bills after the election before January 1? You really expect these to get votes after the start of next year, sir?
Well, we could have votes before the end of the year. My guess is that that's kind of iffy. We don't know where that's going to be at because I can't look in my crystal ball and tell you, you know, that we're not going to have some bumps with the legislation we're bringing forward and some people not agreeing or whatever. You know how that works. But I can tell you by spring of next year, my goal is that's my drop dead date to get it done. I want to get it on the floor and get it pushed across the line and have it become law and have the governor actually pick it up and say, our discussions that I've had with the governor, he's been very confident that we can accomplish those things and he would sign what we're trying to bring forward. So, I mean, I think that we've had agreed on everything. One of the bills, and I'll just tell you one of them that I told them right out, no-knock search warrants being totally, that's not going to happen. No, if anybody who understands what a no-knock warrant is for, it's for the most dangerous situations where civilians and officers can be hurt or killed. And these are the ones where you have the methamphetamine manufacturing things going on in an apartment building, or, you know, you've got trafficking of children, those type. You don't want to give them advance warning you're coming, you know, so that they can get rid of the evidence or they can secret the people that have been traffic. So those no-knock warrants are created for that. And there are so many loopholes or so many hoops you have to jump through to be able to get those approved by the courts and everything else. Are there mistakes sometimes? Yes, there can be, but if you stick to the process, and I don't know what they did with the one where the one gal was killed.
Breonna Taylor in Atlanta, yes.
But I don't know what all those circumstances were and what their process are. I know here in Wisconsin, they stick to the process. All my time in law enforcement, it was like, well, and I did a lot of search warrants. I don't think I might have done one no-knock that I actually did, but I went on a few no-knocks, and it was like, wow, I can't believe all the steps that you have to go through to get a search warrant for that. And this is part of the process. So the governor knew that right off the bat in Hawaii, and so did the attorney general, because I've had conversations with him, and he agreed that this is a necessary thing that we need are the no-knocks.
Senator, do you expect the Speaker's task force to go along with your bills?
I would hope so. I don't know that the task forces that has been brought forward is necessary. I think we've been working on this for such a long time. We've had a lot of input from everybody, but if they see something we didn't see, we sure are willing to look at things and make adjustments. If it improves the bill, I mean, that's the goal. You want to get a good piece of legislation accomplished so that you're not fixing it later, and that it does what you're attempting to accomplish. So, I mean, if the task force comes up with things that they think are good, we're not going to wait for the task force. But if the task force comes up with ideas that we can implement and that we can put into the bill that makes it better, always open for improvements on ways that, I didn't think about that. Okay, let's do it this way. I think you have to have a. Do I have you?
Yes, sir. Welcome back, Senator.
Oh, sorry about that. My computer died on me.
That's okay. We can make a go of it. So I've got the bill draft summaries in front of me, sir, and there's 8 of them. So in the interest of time, tell me the top 3 or 4 priorities of these of your bill draft, sir.
Okay, so I think one of the first ones that we're looking at in this bill package is the Use of Force Review Board.
Okay.
That bill, what that's going to do is that creates a board that will review any officer-involved deaths, whether it's an officer who passes or it's a citizen that dies as a result of interaction with law enforcement. This group would come in as if they were the National Transportation Safety Board when they have a plane crash or something where it's commercial transportation. They come in and review things from an objective position, looking at all of the evidence, the scene, interviews, etc., and then they look at it purely to determine the root cause of what happened, not for pointing fingers or for determining civil liability or criminal liability, but for determining how can we prevent this from happening again, and then creating a database that you can draw from that would help support training and working with officers and having a better handle on what law enforcement specifically ends up dealing with. And so I think this would be something that could be a model, not just for Wisconsin, but it could be a national model that could help other states work with coordinating that.
So no other state has this, Senator?
Nope, they don't. Not that I'm aware of anything like what we're trying to do.
Okay.
They do have it in other fields, so like in the medical field for surgical procedures when somebody passes as a result of a surgical procedure or something like that.
Okay.
They have a board that looks at what do they do. Are there procedures? Are there issues with that? Is it cleanliness? I mean, all those different things when you're looking at it from the medical side.
What's your second most important bill, sir?
I think, let's see, second most important bill.
Mandatory reporting of the use of force,
Well, I think
providing whistleblowers?
I think that's at the top of the list. I think that we already see a lot of these things we already have. I mean, we have reporting to the federal government on issues that happen with use of force. That has to be reported. It's collected by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They just changed the terminology of that report. It's going to be changing, I think, at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So we did some legislation so it would be consistent with what the federal government's doing now. But it would give us a better ability to be able to assess issues that are going on, and if we have to address training issues, the Bureau of Training and Standards, of which I got to say this: Wisconsin has a really phenomenal training system. We require 720 hours of training for our officers initially, and then when they come out of the academy, they go to the local entities, and they go into training there sometimes for a year before they're actually out on the street themselves, a field training officer. So, and then we have continued education that's required for certification for every officer every year, that they have to maintain training. So they get continuous training, and this would help direct the type of training that they're going to receive, and be able to look at, what's the value of each one of those modules of training. Example might be mental health issues, or it might be a hands-on for the force continuum, with how we utilize those things in the force continuum.
Would your bills track officers who are more prone to using deadly force?
Yes.
It would.
Yes.
Okay, because the agency would have to report that to state DOJ, and DOJ would have to publish that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So the idea is to be able to not only compile that information, but create a report that shows how it's used, and then create instances that there's going to be different types of training, maybe. And a lot of times it might be one of the bills that they were bringing forward from the governor was one that would bar and outlaw chokeholds.
Yes.
Okay. Which I did not agree with that bill, the way that it was written, because it made it sound like we've been doing chokeholds in Wisconsin forever, and it's been acceptable. Well, I can tell you right now, I started in 1972, and they have never trained chokeholds as something to get somebody under control. Now, doesn't mean that an officer might not have to use that if he's fighting for his life to keep control of his firearm, or that somebody's got a gun or a knife, they're going to kill somebody themselves, that they couldn't use that. So we modified that bill so that we forbid the training of chokeholds in any academy or in any training situation. So the message is, we don't train those, but I'm not going to force an officer to make a decision on, well, should I choke this guy? I don't want to lose my job because I choked him. That's hesitation for that half a second or a quarter of a second could mean his life or somebody else's. I want him to do whatever he needs to do to get that person under control. And then, especially if they're going after his firearm or something, like the thing that happened down in Kenosha,
Yes.
That was a whole continuum. You saw 20 seconds in between. You didn't see the first part where this fellow was physically fighting with the officers. They were rolling around on the ground. One officer in a headlock. They tased him twice, so they went through that continuum. They were following the continuum. So the rest of the story is still going to come out. So we'll see what happens with the facts.
But as a retired officer, what was your response to the segment that has gone viral where the officer grabbed his shirt and then fired 7 shots? What was your response as a retired officer, Senator?
Well, I thought the headline was irresponsible. Victim shot 7 times in the back, because that really didn't. I thought, oh my God, this is not good. Then you see what happens with that 20-second clip, and you see the officer trying to catch up to this guy going to his car. This guy was obviously not getting in to sit down in his car. He was pulling the door open to reach in and either get something else or to pick up a weapon that was in there. My understanding was he had the weapon before he got to the car, a knife, and that's a weapon in itself. So now the officer, if this guy got there, the first thing would have been to not let him get to the car. Well, but they tried that with wrestling with him on the ground and trying to taser him, and the tasers didn't affect him for some reason. So that's got to tell you something about maybe what's in his system. I don't know, because a lot of times when they have medications or stuff like that in their system, that doesn't allow the things to work properly either, and they have the strength of 10 people. But beside that, then he's getting to the car. The officer's trying to grab him, center him ass to pull him back. And as he's doing that, I don't know what was going through the officer's mind, what he saw, if he saw a weapon coming up, if this guy was telling him, I'm going to kill you. We don't know that. And at that point, the officer saw something that he thought was going to be present a difficulty for him and threaten his life or potentially the people in the car, because there's screaming coming from the passenger in the car. There's kids in the back of the car. I mean, they just went through a bad situation, fighting with them up on the hill with the gale for the initial call. So all this stuff is entering into what the officer's looking at. So firing 7 rounds, that's not unusual. What is unusual is that he hit him. He made contact with those rounds 7 times. Usually it's only 1 or 2 because the adrenaline's flowing.
So you don't know enough yet to know whether that was police misconduct in that incident.
Correct. I mean, there's just not an. I don't. There might be other information that I'm sure the investigators have already.
Okay.
I'm sure that they've got stuff lined up that come out, and I know our Attorney General, Josh, did a good job of, I think, kind of forming it all up and saying, look, we're going to get all of our ducks in a row first, make sure we've covered all the bases, collect all of the evidence, and then the evidence is going to tell a story. And from that, then sometimes you don't like what the outcome is, but you got to get good information in so you get the correct outcome, what actually should be. And that's why the process is so important. Not to jump ahead and for people to take and kind of just guess or assume what might have happened. I would much rather wait till we see all of the evidence and perspectives of what was there, what weapons were present, what was said. I mean, all that stuff's got to come out.
Okay, let me ask you about another one of your bill drafts, sir. Protesters over the last few weeks have been nationally chanting, defund police. Mm-hmm. Your bill, Reference Bureau 6348, require Wisconsin municipalities to maintain law enforcement's budgets or face loss of state shared revenue. Why did you why is that part of your bills? Well,
I think sending a message that the legislature is looking at this too, and that it's not just going to be, well, we're going to cut 50% of our law enforcement. That would be absolutely crazy. Like some of these municipalities have talked about doing away with police totally. That would be a catastrophe. Look at what's happened out in Portland. I mean, they haven't had any law enforcement control of that city for over 100 days. So for me as a citizen, I want to be safe. We don't need to have people sitting at home at their kitchen tables with their deer rifles loaded. That's not America. This is not America. We need to feel safe in our communities. So the idea here was, instead of saying we're just cutting 20 police officers, deal with it. Milwaukee's a great example for that, where they're about 350 officers short. And then the mayor says we're cutting another 60 guys. Yet the crime rate in Milwaukee has skyrocketed. The homicides have skyrocketed. And, who wants to live in that type of an environment? I mean, and so the people that are living there are the people that are stuck there. And they're the people that want the law enforcement there the most. They want police protection. They want to have officers in their community. We've got 6 community policing houses here in R-Racine. We started with one back in 1993, and we've taken back a dozen neighborhoods because of those police-oriented houses that we put there. And officers assigned to those immediate neighborhoods, they're not an occupying force. They become part of the fabric of that community that they're directly working with. So the people that live in that 15 block radius or whatever have the officers' cell phone numbers, and if something comes up that they call the officer directly, and the officer problem solves it and plugs the people into what resources they need. So I think a melding of law enforcement and the community, so that instead of having just 2 officers or 4 eyeballs looking to see what's going on, you now have 400, 500, 600 eyeballs that are working to improve their own environment. And this has worked so successfully for us here. Mount Pleasant, they brought theirs up here just a few years back, and they've had just so many successes with it. And it becomes a community meeting place, and it becomes some place where people can really see what law enforcement is all about and what they do. Officers don't get up in the morning and make the decision they're going to go out and make all kinds of arrests or they're going to hurt people. They want to go and work with people to try to be a problem solver and solve their issues.
How worried are you, sir, about counter protesters coming up saying we need to defend property, et cetera, armed maybe with an AK-15? Are you worried about that growing trend?
Well, it'd be an AK-47 or an AR-15 or an AR-15.
Thank you for the correction.
I don't think we need to have that, especially, this situation happened down in Kenosha. I mean, we had people that were protecting their business, which lawfully they can do if they're on their property and they own the property. They can stand there and do it. But where it gets muddy, You can't just start shooting at people because you think they're going to break out windows in your building. Now, if there's people in the building and they're throwing Molotov cocktails, that might be a different situation. That's something where some people's lives are challenged, like this thing out in Portland where they came and built a fire at the residence of the mayor and they were going to burn the whole place down with people in it. I mean, that could have been something where people could have taken and they could have used deadly force just to protect themselves. It's a little different. The Castle Doctrine allows you to protect yourself and your business. I wrote that piece of legislation. And it also protects you in your car. If somebody's going to carjack you, you can exercise that doctrine, or in your home. But the idea isn't to see how many people we can hurt. The idea is to prevent that from happening. And we don't need to have people walking around with long guns and threats back and forth. We don't need that. If you're going to have a discussion and you're going to come to the table, you don't come with Molotov cocktail components in your knapsack and a long gun strung over your back. You come there with the intent to have a discussion, to try to at least come to some contention where you can agree and maybe agree to disagree on things. I mean, this is what it's about. It's about being able to sit down and having a conversation. But if you don't come to the table and you don't have a conversation, you accomplish nothing.
Does it help the healing and the reconciliation process for President Trump to come on a Tuesday and the Democratic presidential candidate scheduled to come on a Thursday? Does that contribute to the national debate and progress and reconciliation?
Well, I think that, Joe wasn't going to come out until after Labor Day. And I think he was looking at his poll numbers and he made the decision, I better get down to Kenosha, because I don't think he wanted to do it until after. But I think the president coming here kind of pushed him to do that. We'll see what happens Thursday. But I think that you're right. I think that we're having a conversation now. And we're having a conversation that, we don't like this conversation because this is not America where we have people fighting in the streets like that. But it's about, I think, having a good conversation on how can we solve what people's perceptions are of other people. I personally, think about people of color that are friends of mine. I had to really think, because I don't think about them as somebody that's a person of color. They're a friend of mine, they're family. When I get to know somebody, they get a hyphen and they get my last name because they're like family, because you build a relationship. And this is where I think we failed in a lot of ways, that we don't have people sitting down talking and building relationships. And this is what our communities are built. You look at what's happened in Kenosha when we lost American Motors Corporation, and then they raised all those buildings. It looked like Berlin in 1945, like a bombed out shell. And AMC was the one that did everything and took care of everything. You wanted something, you went to AMC, they gave it to you. Nobody had to do that. But then AMC went away, and all of a sudden it was 3-4 years of just being an armpit. And all these little businesses said, wait a minute, we can change this. And they formed CABA, the Kenosha Area Business Association, and other groups. And they took back their community and really built an awesome community. And you see that in southeastern Wisconsin, just like with Foxconn. And I think the casino actually is what drove southeastern Wisconsin to get together and talk about it when we had that debate about having a casino down here.
Yeah. Everybody
Everybody was talking to each other. How can they help each other to be successful? And then when the casino went away, they said, well, we can still talk to each other. Gee whiz, this works. Then Foxconn came, and it wasn't about, okay, I want everything in my county. It was, hey, we've got a perfect spot for you, but it's in Kenosha. And Jim Cruiser and Jonathan Delagrave were on the phone talking to each other daily, multiple times, with opportunities coming to southeastern Wisconsin. And it wasn't about who's going to get the biggest thing here or the best thing. It's what can we do to make both of our communities strong? And this needs to be our message. It needs to be a message of hope that people that are struggling every day just to feed their kids and maybe go on a vacation and have a decent job and a decent retirement. I mean, this is the American dream. Everybody has that opportunity. I don't care who you are. You have the opportunity to have that. So we need to make sure that can happen.
Just two final questions, sir, because I do want to respect your time. I'm going to use the national term because I don't have a better one. How many, quote, bad apples, close quote, are there in America's police force? Officers who may be too prone to use deadly force.
Well, it's probably easier to it's probably easier to cover something like that where somebody doesn't see it right away if you're in a really large department. I mean, I'm talking like a New York City department or Los Angeles where you have 10 or Chicago, you got 10 or 15,000 police officers. It's probably a little easier for that to go under the radar for a while. But I could tell you in any of our communities here in Wisconsin, even Milwaukee, that's got about 1,500, they're supposed to have 1,900 officers. You don't last. If you're somebody that tends to treat people one way or the other, oh, that's noticed right away. And I think that officers, at least in my department, I don't remember ever having to admonish an officer because he mistreated somebody, or if we had situations where we had somebody that would routinely, mistreat people because they were people of color, or the other way, or officers of color treating somebody else, from the opposite, poorly. So I think it's a training issue is really a huge part of it, and confidence in the community and the community coming back. I think that's what really helps make things happen, and having a command structure that's going to support them, and as long as the officers are following the protocols and the policies and procedures and doing things correctly, we need to stand alongside, not behind these officers, but alongside of them to make sure that the officers are not misused for political purposes, but that it's the processes work that if an officer does something wrong, they need to take their lumps. Absolutely. Okay. And not be on suspension and just, long-term pay forever, but they need to take their lumps and whatever happens, happens. But if they're doing stuff right, we want to make sure that they know that the community is alongside of them and that they understand the difficulties that they have to do every day to go out.
And then the final question, all the special interest groups, the governors, the Democrats, the Black Caucus, do they have your word that you expect some Senate votes on your bills by the spring session?
Oh, I've been working on some of these, like I said, for years, through our use of force, or our use of force review board, or our officer involved shooting board.
Yes.
That's been on the drawing board since way back in 2015 or 2016. 2017, we had a conference here at Wingspread down in R-Racine. Michael Bell is the one who brought it forward and helped to bring this thing forward. His son lost his life as a result of a death in Kenosha by an officer. He's been very vocal about his death, but he's kept him separated and purely working to have this be something that can be a positive to help resolve those. I can tell you, we are through draft 8 and it's ready. That's why we're releasing it. And my expectation is to get it done and get this to the governor's desk to get it signed. Yes.
Very good. State Senator Van Wanggaard, a Republican from Racine, represents the 21st District, working on a package of bills that he just said he expects votes at least by the spring session. Senator, thanks very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. That's the vagaries of technology. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
This program is a production of WisconsinEye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. WisconsinEye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.